Hello, everyone, and welcome to the greatest SCP podcast to be founded today. Welcome to the SCP Café. I am your host, Blue Soul, wiki moderator, chat operator, subreddit moderator, author, and so on. We are recording this episode on a Friday. Happy Friday, everybody. Normally want to run these on Thursdays, but it's just as well that we get to do this today instead of yesterday because we have some site news. We have the chosen Anomaly and story element cliches for the Cliché Contest. And if you haven't been following, we're going to run this in 3 different categories. Articles that feature an anomaly, that feel a cliched story element, or that feature both an anomaly and story element. These can be either SCPs or tales. The 5 chosen anomaly cliches. Number 1 is a compulsion effect that makes you do bad things / kills you. Number 2, spooky, scary murder monster or monsters. Number 3, an anomaly so helpful / harmless, the Foundation lets it roam the site freely and it has minimal containment procedures. Number 4, a doorway of any shape to a different dimension / timeline / world. And number 5, an item that is very good at doing the thing it's supposed to do, too good, in fact. So I like all of these. I think you can do, they're cliches that, yes, we've seen a lot of these featured quite frequently. In particular, the compulsion that makes you do bad things, or what we call crazy to death. We've seen a ton of those, but this is what I think is going to make it a fun contest, because you're going to have the ability to take these cliches, and we're not going to get punished for it just for using the cliches. It will, as always, come down to the execution. Our chosen story element cliches are: number 1, a highly skilled mobile task force gets steamrolled. Number 2, an interview in which the anomaly is overly cryptic, followed by the interviewer suffering. Number 3, GOI or POI gets one over the Foundation, making them look like fools in the process. Number 4, termination attempts. And number 5, D-class equals disposable class. So you have the ability to have either featuring one of the anomaly cliches or featuring the story element cliches, or include both. I've seen some chatter in the chat channels of people trying to include as many of these as they can all at the same time. This is one of those where since you've got the restrictions sort of set on, you have to use these cliched elements, it gives you a chance to show your chops outside of your comfort zone, because as an experienced writer that might be taking this contest on, you've kind of learned or grown to not do these things unless you are deliberately introducing it to sort of subvert the normal expectation. So the execution is going to come down to what, as always, execution determines whether you stay or go on the site. The contest rules have been up for a while, but we did get a date added, January 1st to the 31st. So this Cliché Con is going to run for a month, and winners will be announced on February 1st. So you're limited to 1 entry for the contest, and it can be either an SCP or a tale. And it must be at least plus 20 by the end to be considered for the prize. So you've got all the rules. You've got about 10 days. You cannot post your article in advance. So, take the opportunity to get a draft going, solicit feedback in our usual channels. If you think it's ready to go, I've noticed that early entries can have a real advantage. It's good to get them in early. You want to be early to these rather than late. If you have questions about the contest, it is linked on the front page, so you can get to it straight from scpwiki.net. You've got at the bottom links to contact the contest host, Taylor Itkin, and Uncle Nicolini. So what I'd like to do now is get into the recap for the week. We've got about 9 SCPs, including 1 J, that survived over the course of the last week. I'm counting from Friday the 14th. Is that right? Yeah, all day. All day last week on Friday was the 14th. So from the 14th to the 20th, that would be yesterday. I think I have 1 inclusion from today that I'm not sure if it's going to stay up or not, but I'm including it anyway. I really like it. After that, we'll get into the tales and then anything else notable from the week. Now, I do want to be clear, this is a recap show. We will be going over all of the entries that are in the positives this week. If you consider that a spoiler, this may not be the show for you. If you want to go into reading a skip with no preconceived notions on what it is, this is probably not the right show for you. My intent with this is to let people know what's going on and give them an opportunity to get a sort of a quick version on what is been posted, and then they have the ability to go in if they decide that it sounds interesting to them and give it a read. So we're going to get started with SCP-4378. This is at plus 36 in 7 days, and I like the way this kicks off because it's a little absurd. Special containment procedures. SCP-4378 is contained inside a 5-liter stainless steel mixing bowl. The bowl is enclosed within the former kitchen of the United States White House with access via a single outward swinging door. So this is kind of tells you right off the bat this is going to be something a little unusual, a little different than what we've normally seen. The containment procedures include some a little aside in a collapsible about experimental procedures that was rescinded, and experiments are only to be approved by O5 council members. So it's being built up, even though it's got these very odd containment procedures that, this is something with direct O5 oversight, and it's been reclassed from safe to Euclid at the top, so it's already behaving sort of erratically. And you then get the first sentence of the description. SCP-4378 is a single uncooked DeCheco brand lasagna noodle. And there's a picture. Of course there is. And it's exactly what you'd think it is. It's a dry lasagna noodle in a bowl. The article goes into that the disturbing of this lasagna noodle causes physical objects within its range of effect to be transferred to another dimension, and they get a little into some scientific explanation for this, which I always appreciate, saying that the range is proportional to the amount of disturbance. The relational growth rate is estimated to be x times 10 to the power of alpha, with x being the theoretical number of disturbed electrons and alpha being the fine structure constant. So I really appreciate the efforts to try to add that scientific flavor into what, starts out as a very absurdist sort of article. They go on to describe this alternate universe designated SCP-4378-A as a brightly lit void loosely filled with dried pasta, primarily spaghetti noodles. This is the alternate pasta verse, I suppose, and that noodles have been observed spontaneously manifesting within the void during recordings, but the location of their creation is unknown. They indicate that the discovery of the SCP had to do with the sudden disappearance of a black-boxed Secretary of State, and basically that the Secretary of State was observed spontaneously disappearing on security footage recording from the White House kitchen. He opens a cabinet, takes the hold of the lasagna box, removing the now SCP from it, and then the Secretary of State vanishes. And there's a note in here from the project lead sort of explaining that it's interesting that dropping the bowl when the Secretary of State vanished, that nothing happened. It didn't cause any larger effect. And this is sort of hand-waved away in the story by saying that the SCP only reacts when disturbed by a force outside of astronomical constants. So, that may stretch credibility too far for some readers, that, it does this, but only when it's something messing with it, not gravity or it falling over. Personally, I don't mind it too much. But it gets into that after the Secretary of State's disappearance, various noodles are found throughout the White House, discovered arranged in messages. So there's a single piece of spaghetti that is arranged in cursive writing spelling out hello. The president noticed as a coincidence and pointed it out to his wife, to which they both remarked, "What are the chances of that happening?" I love this. And then there was a bowl of alphabet soup given to the president's daughter. The daughter pointed out to the father that the soup seemed to be randomly rearranging into various words, and a bowl of leftover linguine found on top of the mini fridge of the chief of staff's office in the West Wing. The linguine was left out for approximately 2 days, allowing it to dry. All linguine was found arranged into the word thirst. It's speculated that this happened while the linguine was still cooked and then dried out. I love this idea of the pasta verse, of people being sucked in through this disturbance, and they're forced to communicate with the outside world through pasta, and they can't get back out. Do you guys know what this is? This is creepy pasta. It gets into the interview protocol for how you can properly interview people via pasta, via pre-prepared cooked spaghetti noodles, and a lot of attention to doing as much as possible to mitigate the forces that might come in to affect this SCP and perhaps make it disappear more people. And it's just a lot of attention to detail, a lot of safeguards and precautions, and there are interview logs where, you know, there's responses from spaghetti rearranging, and there's been hints throughout this whole thing about incident R4378M2, and they finally get to it, and I do really, I love how they've done this, that they have a note from the person that's compiling the incident report, saying that this incident has proven incredibly difficult to document considering the nature. Most documents compiled in this report have been totally expunged from the public record and are now likely only present in this report. And then you have the big reveal of what the incident is. There was an earthquake at the White House. And not only was there an earthquake at the White House, it was strong enough that the entire fucking White House vanishes. And there's concerned citizens in the street and very confused news crews because the White House has been somehow put back in its place. But you know, the president and all of the cabinet vanished, and they do not get into how that all came to be reverted. There are some vague references to certain protocols to be enabled. It gets into this whole log of, you know, the tactical side of things, of a small strike team in the White House trying to identify the skip, the noodle in the mixing bowl, and then there's an aftershock. They get sucked in, and there's some mixed media in here. There's an audio clip that is it's white noise. It's just this staticky sound that goes on for about 26 seconds. But when you put it in a spectrograph, which they've done for us, it is a picture of spaghetti noodles. That's what the spectrograph turns into. Then there's another interview, and you have these references to noodle, she noodle, touch all, and you come to the conclusion that this may be living up to its name, her noodly appendage. I really enjoyed this. This was an easy +1 for me. It did a lot of things well in finding that balance of silly and really dangerous skip. I don't know how scientifically accurate it is that it's all that likely for a magnitude 6 or 5.8 earthquake really anywhere in New England or the eastern seaboard, but you can hand wave that away pretty easily by asking who caused the earthquake. Maybe touched by her noodly appendage. Going into the comments, the author, Wodenaz, gives some thanks to Dr. Bleep, Modern Erasmus, Leveritas, The Great Hippo, Dr. Sumerian, Lazarlius Sternick, and Diamond in the Making. There are mixed reviews in the comments. The people that explain their reasoning, you get some plus ones and minus ones in about even amounts. And there wasn't anything in this article that I disliked. I think every part of it is good. So, I enjoy that you can take something in the vein of the flying spaghetti monster and potentially subvert it into a more dangerous entity, perhaps with ambitions or aspirations of taking over things. And the author does make comments along those lines. So this is as true of a spoiler as it gets, where the author indicates the implication is that there is a sentient being, essentially the flying spaghetti monster, that is trying to assert its influence into our world. It intentionally chose the White House. So I really liked this, like I said, and this was a great way to kick off the week. Moving on now, we go to SCP-3572. This is sitting at +3 in 6 days. First thing you see is a picture of what looks like a natural cave with some greenery around it. It's subtitled "The Exterior of SCP-3572, Surface Level Outside the Entrance Door." The containment procedures make special mention of that no entry is allowed except for the purposes of monthly maintenance and measurement, in which case time spent in the interior should be minimized and is never to exceed 45 minutes total for any individual. And additionally, that they work with the National Park Service to minimize tourist activity around the area, and that there's been a door and some stuff put up to kind of keep people out. It makes note that the length, the measurements of this cave are important. This is brought up quite a few times just in the containment procedures, and then there's a reference to a -1, that any all sightings of the -1 are to be reported immediately. They describe SCP-3572 as a subterranean cave network only accessible through a singular surface entry located in Barron County, Kentucky. Now, having spent about 10 years in Kentucky, Barron County is in sort of south-central Kentucky, and it's got part of the Mammoth Cave, which is sort of a tourist attraction in the area. Mammoth Cave, I believe, encroaches into that part of the state. The description notes that the central chamber branches out into between 3 and 17 tunnels, which is an interesting way to word it. It makes you wonder, is it that we can't count it correctly, or does the number of tunnels off of the main chamber change? And it seems like it's the latter, that the skip will generally try to keep any humans that venture into it inside, that it doesn't seal itself off, but instead the tunnels will move around, create little things that are, make it likely for for a human to get stuck. And the longer somebody's inside, the more severe the conditions get inside the cave. Eventually, if somebody dies inside, the cave collapses around them, compressing and grinding the cadaver into mush over the course of about 2 weeks. So what I'm left with is this visual of the cave as sort of a monster that it, tries to slowly compress its way onto a human, and then it eats them. Then it describes the -1. SCP-3572-1 is a Level 3 humanoid apparition, conceptually bound, free-roaming, passive, benevolent. I'm not personally a big fan of including those, sort of keywords that it's implied that these are words that are used colloquially within the Foundation, unless they've been really established over a long period of time by other writers. It then says that SCP-35721 is the wraith of a local cave explorer who died in the interior of 3572 in 1925. The specter is bound to the subterranean cave networks and cannot appear above ground. This is getting a touch off the rails for me from a scientific perspective. I don't like the use of the word wraith or specter. That may just be me, but we'll keep going here. They go on to say that this specter can roam independently throughout the Mammoth Cave National Park system, though it has also been sighted abroad. We'll see if they come back to that. We have a discovery log that there was a cave-in, and I like this bit at the end, basically that after the Foundation determined the anomalous nature of it, the family of the person that fell victim to the cave-in, their family went back to try another retrieval effort, and there's just this sentence thrown in: owing to the extenuating circumstances surrounding the death of the subject, a facsimile cadaver was provided to the family. I love little things like that kind of let the Foundation flex, that you can provide a fake cadaver that is convincing enough to give to the immediate family. Now, the bulk of the rest of the article is made up of a series of journal entries, and I don't want to get too into the weeds in reading them. Suffice it to say, they're very good. The pacing is good, and you're left with a number of unanswered questions, and then we go into the next addendum, and it answers some and gives many other questions. All in all, I think this is highly underrated at +3. It started out a little clunky. The addendum 2, I think, is what really pulls this back for me from being a no vote to a +1. And one thing that I find is interesting is in the comments, all of the comments are for people giving this a positive vote. We don't have really anybody with gripes against this, and looking at the page rating, it actually doesn't have a lot of votes at all. We've only got what looks like, 6, 12, about 18 people. So it's, what is that? 7 downvotes and 11 upvotes. So this, I think, deserves more eyes. Good or bad, I think this has got some really good stuff that's been done in it. And I think this is worth a read. This appears to be the author's second entry, the first being SCP-2918, which is currently at 103. So don't let the low rating on this scare you off. This is a good one. I like this. Moving on, SCP-4052. This is currently at +6 in how many days? +6 in 4 days. And the first thing we have is a picture of a little kid's sandbox in the shape of a turtle. It's object class safe, and the procedures are pretty low key. That should be kept in its packaging, stored in a locker, and any testing has to be done with some supervision. The original packaging is a large white cardboard box of dimensions 2 meters by 2 meters by 0.25 meters with, quote, the seismic sandbox, quote, written across the top in large red letters. Not a huge fan of this sort of way to provide exposition in the story, but we'll continue. It says the box artwork has 2 kids sitting inside SCP-4052 playing and laughing. The packaging reads, tired of your own boring sandbox? Discover the world beneath your feet with the seismic sandbox. Discover lava pools, caves, gemstones, and more. The only limit is your imagination. And the gimmick with this one is that when 4052 is placed on soil, dirt, rock, or sand, the sand within the sandbox shifts to resemble a scale model of the area in a radius of 2 kilometers, and either lifting it off the ground or putting the lid on makes the sand go back to its original state. But when you shift the sand within the sandbox, the terrain shifts as well, and likewise altering the terrain will change the formation of sand. And you have a video transcript where where they bought it, and a dad buys it for his kid, and then they he messes with the sand, and then throws sand around and tears up the landscape and having a great time. And then all of a sudden, the wife of the guy comes home, finds it. Oh, I see. I was misreading this. The kid is the one that's messing around with it and accidentally sort of destroyed the 2 kilometer area around where they were. And a cover-up story involving a gas pipeline explosion was created. The skip was recovered and transferred to Site 19. This is a pretty short one. The video transcript gives it some vertical length, but it's a lot of dialogue, so they're a sentence per line. Ultimately, this isn't breaking any new ground. There's nothing in here that I really love. I can't upvote this, and I feel like this is closer to a -1 than a no vote. I don't see anything in here that's really a net positive for the wiki. I don't think it's beyond redemption. I don't think this iteration of it is it. There's stuff you could do with the ability, with the gimmick that you have this sort of terraforming sandbox, but there's going to be a better way to do it than what we've got here. We cut very briefly. We've got 2 sentences. I'm sorry, maybe 3 sentences going into the actual damage that was incurred, and at the core, this isn't intended to be a joke. This is a main list entry. This doesn't really fit the horror aspect that I am personally really going for. Moving on, we have our joke article, SCP-Big Egg. This is at +91 in 3 days. This thing has had a rocket strapped to it. Item number is SCP-Big Egg. The object class is Keter, and I read this one thoroughly. I've already given it a +1. I'm not going to do it justice, given the nature of it. It's one of these that makes heavy use of wordplay in this vein of the entity forces us to write in a certain way or to use certain words, and in this case the words are Big Egg. So for example, you have the in the containment procedures, I'll just read this first paragraph for the containment procedures. SCP-Big Egg is to be kept in a specially manufactured Big Egg carton located in Egg Observation Site 77. Any and all changes are to immediately be reported to the site director, who has the Egg Authority to call down Mobile Task Force Row 19 Egg, the frying pan, to dispatch or terminate SCP-Big Egg using several jumbo industrial-sized vats of big balsamic vinegar. And they go on to, in the description, say SCP Egg is a big egg, and that's struck through. It says, an unidentifiable object masked by an anti-memetic egg field, which prevents any and all sapient breakfast consumers from perceiving it or the situations surrounding it in any other way than Big Egg. A mild, yet big, semantic egg property prevents SCP-Big Egg from being referred to as any other official, proper, or big designation. So, this goes on. There's a twist in here saying, limited research conducted using nestic egg drugs has suggested that Big Egg's true form might be an obese naked man who has been observed running throughout the facility yelling, "It worked! They'll never know I'm not Big Egg." These claims are in dispute, as a battery of scientific tests have shown SCP-Big Egg to be only a bird egg of unusual big. Reports of egging, bigging, and general mayhem throughout the Foundation related to SCP-Big Egg are to be roundly ignored, as its egg properties of big and egg roundly preclude these possibilities. I have to admit, I really have a soft spot for this kind of stuff. I'm not objective with something like this. This is humor that's right up my alley. Um, and the whole thing is like that. Where was it? Here we go in the addendum. This I shot a message to the author saying this was my favorite line in it. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, I'll back up. This is an addendum to. Unfortunately, SCP Big Egg has recently experienced a growth spurt, meaning it is almost twice as big and nearly 4 times as egg. So this does read better than I am making it out to be, I'm certain. But this is not to be missed. I really, really enjoyed it. It's not terribly long, and they actually did leave some room to do more of these. They have a list at the end that this is basically one of the little misters. That this is Mr. One Egg. So I they really handled this in an excellent way that they can come back to this trope. They though you obviously I don't think you could do it quite the same way, and there is of course one of the results for an experiment says data egg sponged. So we're going to move from Big Egg to SCP-4217. This is at plus 27 in 3 days. And the first thing that strikes me is we have an old-timey black and white picture. And the second thing that strikes me is by the time you expand all of the collapsibles, this thing is long. This thing is probably 6 pages long, if not more. So I actually, given the positive rating, the Keter object class, and the black and white photo, that's normally a good combination for me that this is going to be suitably creepy. The containment procedures go into that. Foundation naval forces patrol the territory with 3 or more battleships under the guise of the British Royal Navy, and that we are to engage this SCP until it reverts from a hostile to a passive state, and that civilian vessels attacked are to be recovered and processed in accordance with maritime disinformation protocols. The first line in the description really, I think, catches you. It says that SCP-4217 refers to both the Bismarck, henceforth SCP-4217-A, an anomalous German battleship sunk on 1941-05-24, and the large cephalopoid organism that is fused to the inside of its hull, henceforth SCP-4217-B. So I always, I love the visual of this, when I hear, cephalopod instead of like octopoid, I'm thinking like a giant squid. And they go on to describe that the organism possesses a pair of octopoid eyes which protrude from the base of the ship's superstructure, and 12 100 to 200 meter long appendages that extend from an opening in the stern. Aside from the presence of this giant fucking squid, the ship shows no signs of damage sustained from battle or the subsequent decades submerged underwater. And furthermore, the squid operates the ship's systems. This includes its full armament of 8 main guns, 44 secondary guns, 12 anti-aircraft guns, and it can also operate the propellers to reach speeds approaching 40 knots. I love this. This is really interesting. I can't remember seeing a symbiotic relationship with an anomalous squid and a battleship. I can't really think of anything quite in this vein. It goes on to explain in the first addendum that the SCP-4217 designation previously referred only to the ship itself, which was believed to have been neutralized in 1941, and it shows basically a second SCP entry within the entry. I dig this. This is a cool way to provide sort of a look back and maybe provide some exposition in this way. And they describe the ship, and some pieces that were not mentioned in the original description, including things like thaumatological symbols etched into the hull at key locations to reinforce the ship's armor, a weak psionic field with a radius exceeding 20 kilometers, basically causing individuals that are hostile to it to experience confusion regarding the ship's identity, increasing the likelihood of friendly fire when individuals mistake allied vessels for it, and potential self-repair capabilities, including a big, what would sound to be a rip in the hull that's been repaired in a manner visually resembling the healing of wounds in organic tissue. Artillery shells containing an unknown gas with mutagenic properties. Organisms exposed to the compound will experience growth / loss of limbs and sensory organs, development of fur, feathers, and or scales, and in one unverified report, multiple victims being fused together into a single entity. And there's a footnote that says this property has been confirmed neutralized. And lastly, a hypothesized anomalous power supply of an unknown, possibly biological nature. During interrogation, surviving crew members stated that SCP-4217 required a unique type of fuel. Chemical analysis found the fuel to consist primarily of organic nutrients. None of the captive crew members reported having seen the interior of the engine room, although 2 claimed to have heard a sound resembling a heartbeat while in that region of the ship. Oh, we were doing so well. I don't like that last little bit. I don't like getting beat over the head with how organic / living this thing probably is. I think there's better ways to go about it than, we heard a heartbeat around the engine room. The entry then goes into a timeline where it is revealed that this was built essentially by the Obscura Corps, which is portrayed or presented as the occult branch of the German government during the Nazi era. So this in 1939 would have been part of a possible escalation of power leading up to World War II. They go into a collaborative effort between the Foundation and the British Navy, and a really well done accounting here. And then we go into at the end of that a transcript from 1985 where a team from an MTF go down to investigate the wreckage. The dialogue here is really good. It's really natural sounding, and they find that things are in suspiciously good shape. The regenerative properties of the ship are still very much active, and that's where we get this reveal that there is something that is attached to it throughout the ship, and that it's not stone, it's more like rubber. And they start kind of messing with it, find out that it's bleeding, and they go to get out, and crash, splash, radio silence. So that is what our first sighting of it in the current designation begins there. We go into transcripts recovered by GRU Division P, showing some backstory leading into the building of the thing. And finally, we have an incident from 1993 where Foundation go to respond in the established procedures. Only this time we have an opportunity for a transcript, to have a sort of discussion with the ship, which responds in German. It is implied that the squid, this creature, is able to answer the hails over the radio, and sends a video feed. And I don't really care for this particular exposition because the fact, I don't know how you could have a ship from the 40s sending a video feed that is understood to be a feed through our standard audio channels that that a ship would need. And it doesn't make a ton of sense. That pulls my nerd self out of the immersion for a moment, but they start mentioning the planet Jupiter is being noted as an image from this video, and they focus on this that this creature remembers Jupiter and the big red spot and the red storm, and it's agitated, it escalates, and we open fire and we end story. All in all, really liked it. I think it is underrated right now at 27. I think there is a lot of things done well in this, and only a couple of things that I don't care for. And to be honest, most of them are my personal sort of gripes with how I like to see things presented. This is an easy +1 for me. And I think this is a particularly impressive first outing for this author. This blending of history into historical fiction. There's references to Operation Paperclip and some notable events of World War II. It was all executed really well, and I hope to see more from this author, Gentleman Thief, in the future. Up next, we have a rewrite. This is a Series 3 rewrite of SCP-2801 by Attila the Pun. This is at +18 in a day. It is an object class Keter, and the first thing that I note is in the second sentence of the procedures, all Foundation personnel are to undergo screening for SCP-2801-1 infection on a monthly, which is struck through, and then says bi-weekly basis. And then it says that no more than 2 persons infected by SCP-2801-1 are to be held at any given facility, and all infected persons not held for research purposes are to be immediately terminated. No recordings of infected persons are to be made, and all other cognitohazardous material containing SCP-2801-1 are to be destroyed. And it gets into Foundation web crawlers are to monitor websites and hacker forums. So we're getting into the description, which is that it is software for Linux-based operating systems capable of generating Class 2 cognitohazards. This is getting into my wheelhouse as an IT guy for the last 15 years. I've done quite a bit of stuff, so the downside to that, the good news is I really like computer skips that are done well. The bad news is I'm really, really brutal with the sort of liberties that people tend to take with how computers, networks, and so on actually work. They explain that the effects of the hazards generated are determined by user-written code similar in syntax to the C programming language. So I'm curious if we'll get an actual example of this code. And they then say that the software has demonstrated the ability to create self-propagating cognitohazards, referred to as SCP-2801-1. And then there's a footnote indicating that they are individual instances are called variants and are referred to using alphabetical designations. Now, it sounds like what we're getting into is a sort of cognitohazardous virus. And they do go on to explain that these cognitohazards are capable of nearly complete control over a host's behavior, including motor control, memory access, and psionic field manipulation. So what we have is apparently a Trojan horse for people. We go into a timeline, and then we have a forum post on a hacker forum, and it's titled Neurocrack, Mind Exploit Development Tool and Worm Source Code. So we go into a little bit of some hacker speak. The whole thing up to now, I'm glossing over a lot of it, but they've actually nailed the tone. They've done a really good job of it. So they ask, wouldn't it be cool if you could hack a person like a computer? And we figured out, yes, you can, and it's unbelievably easy. I really like this forum post all in all because it includes some little clues that might tell you that this is pretty well researched. Even little things like, for God's sake, read the instructions, and basically indicating that, I've had fun with it, but I didn't properly cover my ass. So, make sure you're paying attention to OPSEC and happy hacking and welcome to the secret world. So we get into a timeline where, this thing was downloaded 97 times before the Foundation intervened. So we see, more and more of these variants over time as it's kind of grown organically and been re-uploaded to other places online. They go ahead and introduce some groups of interest. They show the GOC beginning to identify and terminate persons in possession of this software. Now, this is fun. August 4th, 2018, Dr. Charles Stone, Assistant Director of Site-22, enters a coma as a result of SCP-2801 Bravo Echo infection. As is typical of Bravo Echo behavior, Dr. Stone cut himself on his left arm with a knife on his person and wrote the message, "Send Bitcoin, have 1 week," along with a Bitcoin address in his blood on the wall of his office before expiring. This is a really bizarre intersection with one of the things that I do off the site, and that is help people deal with ransomware infections. So what we have here is ransomware for humans. And this is this is really good. I mean, they've done an outstanding job. They didn't try too hard to explain the way that certain things would work, and they didn't rely on certain things that will never work when you have more than a layman's understanding of how computing works. You've then got a cyber attack using this software that puts the Foundation under siege, and there are a number of containment breaches. So they've done a really good job raising the stakes with this software, and due to the sort of insidious nature of how the dark web and the deep web work, that this does really merit its Keter designation. This is almost impossible to contain, even with the resources available now. They end this saying that the attack is still ongoing, and the Foundation is basically got their pants down for this. They've made very little progress with actually any remedial work for removing the sources at this point, or if they have, it's not really thoroughly indicated as much in this timeline. So this is a really nice blend of the current state of the internet and adding in the horror elements that really make it land and work well on our website. This is a +1, and you have to realize I do not give out a lot of +1s for computing or, IT related SCPs. This, I think, is a great example that I will show to others of how to approach it. They do not try to explain things that can't be explained appropriately, and sometimes that's all there is to it. Moving on, we're going to go to SCP-4288. This is at +13 in a day. The containment procedures mention businesses selling live pine trees are to be regularly monitored and inspected by Foundation personnel for SCP-4288 infection. Any trees found to be carrying this SCP are to be incinerated immediately. Contained trees carrying the SCP are to be kept within an airtight chamber, only accessible through a single airlock. This is pretty gnarly containment procedures. It also includes if an individual is exposed to 4288 without proper protective equipment, they are to be immediately terminated and incinerated to prevent further infection. So when I see stuff like this, I mean, this is about as severe containment procedures as you can practically have to, kill and burn people alive. I'm sorry, well, you're not burning them alive, but you are incinerating the body just when they are, exposed to something. That's pretty gnarly, and that does give me, that places certain expectations upon the rest of the article. It needs to stand up and deliver and be worth those procedures. It goes into the description that it is a species of fungus that grows within the trunks of pine trees. It has a glossy, thin texture, making detection within trees difficult. and the visual appearance varies between instances but will often be patterned with the colors green, red, and white. We might have a Christmassy skip here, I suspect. It doesn't perform photosynthesis, and instead gains nutrients by taking them from the organism that it resides within. After so much time, it grows on the exterior of the organism and eventually encases the host, and then it'll absorb all the possible nutrients before dying. And once it's growing on the outside, it releases spores. So we're doing a lot of building up on how exactly this thing works. This is a lot of explaining how we get to the gimmick, and it involves a number of intermediate steps. And it goes on to explain that the subjects exposed to the SCP have shown no control of their limbs, in addition to not responding to external stimuli. And when they're no longer under the effect, they have a significant decrease in memory retention and fine motor skills, and they show no recollection of their actions taken while under the SCP's influence. They can no longer discern fungus from non-anomalous wrapping paper, and I feel like they might have jumped the gun on including wrapping paper here, but that's what we have to go by. I'm not super taken by this paragraph. We have a lot of explaining of things before we get into what's going on. It's sort of set up to answer questions in advance, but it doesn't necessarily give me any reason to care, why these answers are being provided. So now we get into the meat of the article. So here's our payoff for the procedures, and it is that while under the effect of this entity, subjects will gather items that are sentimental value or expensive and delicately wrap this SCP around gathered objects. And they'll make sure that no portion of the object is able to be seen through the covering of the SCP, and then place it under the SCP's original host. So we're really dancing around what this thing looks like, which is that it looks like wrapping paper. And these people will wrap things and put it under the pine tree, under the Christmas tree. And they go on to explain that once the SCP is thoroughly covering an object, it'll begin converting the object's mass into reproductive spores, and during the process, the entity will die, and it'll harden into the shape of the object it was originally covering. So they put this fungus around a gift, and the gift will eventually be covered in it and look like a wrapped package. But once it's touched, any physical contact will cause the spores to burst, releasing a large spore burst over everything within 10 meters of the instance. I'm really not taken with this. There's too much dancing around what the thing looks like. Like you can say that it looks like wrapping paper. It would change the things that you could do with this article, because there is no investigation at all as to how it would come to look. Who's behind this? You can't have something that is so ubiquitous around the world and not have that investigation on, well, what would cause such a thing? Who would be behind such an act? Because I don't think that's something that's going to happen truly organically, and I think it's a big miss for this article. I think it would have been far better served getting into that side of it than where this ends up with, which is basically just a further explanation of the spore burst, and you get into some body horror and a small addendum about an outbreak of packages where there are all these spore bursts and a containment, and then it just sort of ends. I don't, there's not enough in here that I really care for to upvote it, but there's not enough that it's really actively doing wrong for me to downvote it. This is a no vote for me. This is, I believe, another first time entry. So, the author has done a reasonable job, but for me, there could be more done in the other exploration of it, of figuring out, what's behind this, because that is a huge piece that we have. We have so many existing GOIs, and you can bring in your own, certainly, but as it is, it feels lacking. I don't connect with this in any way, and I think that it does have a lot to do with all of the maybe slightly too much dancing around what the thing actually looks like. And it's a delicate line to walk, I'm fully aware. There's plenty of stuff that just comes right out, slaps you across the face with what the thing is, does, looks like, and it, reads like a monster manual entry. You can't do that, but this is a demonstration of what can happen if you go too far in the other direction. It's really unclear without some fairly intensive reading what exactly the thing is meant to be. Now, lastly, we've got one that was posted today. This is SCP-4259. It's currently at +2 in 8 hours. So it's actually had some mixed voting so far, but I am optimistic about this one, so I want to get into it a little bit. It starts off at the top with a notice saying that the SCP possesses an info-hazardous effect which inhibits attempts to document it by Foundation personnel, and that this report's been transcribed by a 10-year-old. It's been transcribed from a paper document written by a 10-year-old of the former site head researcher and the leader of an internal task force. And that from, a redacted amount of time, this task force handled the direct testing and containment procedures, blah, 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 blah. We've got basically the entire thing is written with intentional issues with spelling, punctuation, and grammar, meant to sort of reflect that 10-year-old writing. And it even includes a little, sort of a stick figure drawing with an artist's rendition of the SCP. This is an interesting format screw. This one's I enjoy this on its premise, and I think it gets better from there, because if you ignore, depending on whether or not you find the spelling errors to be overly distracting, then this might pull you out because it's pretty common through it. But I dig the procedures because it goes into strike through of SCP-4259 is really cool, and then it says SCP-4259 lives in the big blue room in the site where my dad works, struck through, worked. There needs to be a big ring of salt around the whole room all the time, and William needs to be careful not to step on the circle with his big feet again. This is awesome. This is really an entertaining way to go about it, because you've got, this is, they put it out there, this is a team of 10-year-olds that are in charge of containing this entity. Now then it goes into, whenever you go in the big blue room, you have to say the password or else untranscribable in bold and square brackets. And there's a footnote that says that certain parts of the document possess strong anti-mimetic properties which make them impossible to type. These have been marked with untranscribable in this report. I'm not too sure about this trope being used. I'm not sure it really adds much. There is a moment in here where I think it does a lot. So it's not the worst way to go about it, but I would like a little more build up, because this does kind of slap you out of the blue, and it's a little jarring the first time that you see it, and you kind of have I had mixed feelings about where we were going from here. And then it goes into, Emma writes the new passwords down in her notebook every Friday. SCP-4259 gets to have 1 bar of chocolate per day, And since Incident 4259B, SCP-4259 gets to use the 3DS first, but only if she says please, and only if Emma got to use it yesterday. I really, really enjoy this so far. They've called themselves the Awesome Squad as the internal task force, that we're in charge of all the testing, and grown-ups don't get to go in the big blue room while we're testing. The Awesome Squad shouldn't go near the body in the back corner of the big blue room. Bang, one sentence. We shouldn't go near the body in the corner of the room. And since Incident 4259A, Dennis has to stop pulling my hair during testing. This, cutting in and out of, sort of terrifying elements and 10-year-olds, internal drama is, I have never seen this before. I'm really, really entertained by it. A little further down, you've got, when SCP-4259 is happy, everyone else is happy, and the whole room feels warmer. Everyone likes it when SCP-4259 is happy. The salt circle makes SCP-4259 really unhappy. These simple sentences, this, sort of 4th, 5th grade writing level, is such a breath of fresh air when it's done intentionally. We've got not a small number of these that get posted unintentionally at this level, but throwing in stuff like the salt circle makes it really unhappy. I really dig it. It goes into that, the SCP likes cute animals but doesn't like not cute animals, and the not cute animals get scared of the SCP for some reason. We didn't find this out until Incident C, when Untranscribable got really scared and was accidentally terminated. Since the incident, Untranscribable is now a non-cute animal, and we don't talk about him anymore. The Awesome Squad shouldn't go near the body in the back corner of the big blue room. And there's a footnote, and it includes another stick figure drawing of what looks to be a dog with its face sort of scratched through a bunch of times. It's all of these little touches, I think, really, really do well here. And we go into the incident reports, the notable one being Incident Report Bravo. And it says, the password was "It speaks in the twilight," but Will forgot and thought it was "It talks in the twilight." The SCP said it was wrong, but Will said, no, talk and speak were the same thing. Emma said that speak was more auspicious, but no one knew what that meant, so she said it was like fancy and important. Even Will agreed that it sounded more important sounding, so he said sorry, but SCP-4259 was still upset, so she untranscribable. We all tried to get her to give him back, but she kept saying wrong password and untranscribable. This was my favorite line in the whole thing. That, out of all of this, sort of mundane, silly kid stuff, all of a sudden we tried to get her to give him back. What? And Emma told her she could have the 3DS first from now on if she gave Will back, and that she would go last instead. The SCP agreed, but I said that Emma could get it first if she had to leave before the end the last time. Dennis thought this was dumb, because what if someone else didn't get a turn last time? But I told him shut up, and anyway, SCP-4259 liked the idea. Then she untranscribable again, and Will said he felt all squished. We played Animal Crossing. SCP-4259 got to go first. This is... I don't have enough good things to say about this. The last incident report gets into finding out that the SCP-4259 likes cute animals, and Dennis brought a big dog that no one had ever seen before. He said he was untranscribable and had it for years and years, and we thought that was weird because he never talked about it. And then it goes, SCP hissed in a really scary way I'd never seen, and untranscribable. Then untranscribable, but he untranscribable, and he howled and ran up to SCP-4259 and almost untranscribable, but I untranscribable, 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 I, Dennis, I'm sorry, I untranscribable, untranscribable. these escalations in the right places are awesome. He didn't want to talk to me. I tried to tell him, but he kept crying and crying, and Emma told me I'd done enough. He kept saying, scribbled over, I talked to SCP-4259 last night. She said I was her best friend in the whole world. The Awesome Squad shouldn't go near the body in the back corner of the big blue room. End article. I've told you how I feel about this. I think it's, criminally underrated right now at +2, particularly for a first-time entry. This checks all of my boxes for an interesting presentation, some, good usage of sort of hiding the, leaving the more horrific elements intentionally obscured, but still in an interesting way. This does everything right. I think this is, a great example and a really encouraging first entry. Lastly, I want to mention a tale, +62 in 7 days, titled He Sees You When You're Sleeping, He Knows When You're Awake, written by Dr. Sumerian, and it is very touching and heartwarming and not remotely terrifying, and there's certainly not a twist on the last line. And that's pretty much it for SCPs for this week. Overall, a pretty good mix. I liked quite a lot of them. Some of them were a little lacking to me, but not actually borne out in the voting results. So I'm never, going to stand here and say that I'm the ultimate arbiter of what flies and dies on the wiki. So very pleased with the entries by first-time writers that do look like they're going to stick around. A good mix of things I've never seen before and things executed very well. People with excellent grasp of tone. All these things that, give me a lot of optimism and confidence for where the wiki is headed. And that about wraps up this first episode of the SCP Café. I hope this has been enjoyable for you. I've enjoyed reading some skips. This is my first time, reading new stuff as it's being posted in quite literally years. This is sort of the running gag with staff that you spend way too much time doing the staff duties. And frankly, the reading, much less the writing, can really take a back seat unless that is, all the entirety of what you do. When you have teams like the forum criticism team that see pretty much everything that comes in, they're obviously the exception. But I do tech stuff. I do internet outreach stuff. None of my duties with the wiki intersect with ever reading the damn things, so I don't usually make time for them, but I've been wanting to do this for a while, and I'm happy to present it in this recap format, so I hope it's helpful for you. We're going to be posting this on the SCP subreddit. There is a website that's going up as well at scp.cafe. And you can check it out there. We're going to be syndicated on iTunes and other formats to come when I figure out what exactly is needed for that. I've done the iTunes thing in the past for the O5 Command Show, which will probably have an episode either over the holidays or maybe going right into the beginning of the new year to go over the contests. If you have any feedback, any thoughts, things you liked, things you didn't like, please let me know. You can either respond to the subreddit thread on our SCP. You can hit me up on our IRC network as Bluesoul, or you can shoot me an email if you want at ipunchbears@bluesoul.me. That's all for this week. We'll see you next week, and thank you so much for listening.